Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. This is going to be a very interesting video, I hope. I'm going to be responding to Chris from Jerno's Comics. He recently did a video entitled It's So Gay, and his video was really in response to the controversy around Tim Drake coming out as bi in one of the comics. That's the Nightwing character. And the thing is, his comments were great. Actually, I agree with Chris in a lot of ways. However, he did say something that bothered me, and I'll get into what he said and how it bothered me. So, what he was talking about was how people were commenting about the bisexualness of the character, and they were commenting that it was lazy writing, that it was forced into the story, and so forth. And they hadn't read the story. And so Chris rightly put out the fact that if you don't read the story, you don't really have the right to comment that way. You should read it first and then make that comment and see if it's truly lazy writing. And he's right about that. We have a tendency of jumping to conclusions, and that's not right. So you shouldn't just jump to conclusions without first reading the story. And then you're free to comment. If you think it was forced in and whatever, you can comment once you've read the book. And I actually joked in his stream that I thought it was lazy reading that people hadn't read the story before they made those kind of comments. So, but later in his video, he said something that kind of bothered me. And what it was, and it's a very simple comment, and it's a comment that I hear all the time. People always have this weird opinion that back in the 40s or 50s, things were different. People back then, they were so racist, and we're so progressive nowadays. And that's actually a false notion. Like, to assume that people in the past were really, really racist is totally false. There was racism, and there's racism now. There's always been racism. It's something that will always be part of humanity. As long as there's different races, we will always have racism because people see those differences and we react to those differences. But I kind of want to tell you some stories from the golden age of comics and show you how people thought even back then. Now, the first black superhero was Black Panther. That was in the 60s. But in the Golden Age, that didn't mean that they didn't have black characters. They did have black characters in comics. And they were not marginalized or put down. They were central characters. They were actually characters of merit. And one that I talked about in a previous video is Steamboat. I love Steamboat as a character. He's a great character. And the reason they introduced Steamboat into Captain Marvel, he was a Captain Marvel character, and that's for people nowadays would know him as Shazam. But the reason they introduced Steamboat into the comics was they wanted to get more black readers. They wanted to get more black readers because they knew that if they put in a black character, they would black people would identify with that black character, and they thought that that would bring in more black readers. So what happened was the very first story with Steamboat is a story where Captain Marvel is like dealing with these crooks, these people that are constantly robbing people at this park. And there's a scene where Captain Marvel is like indisposed. He's like dealing with other criminals, and there's a bunch of criminals that are about to shoot a group of people. Now, Steamboat, his job is he had a food cart, and he would just, he would have this horse and buggy, and he would walk around not walk around, but ride around and basically sell food to people at the park. And when Steamboat, who has no superpowers, when he saw these people were in real danger of losing their lives because there was this older group of mobsters that were about to shoot them all down, he rode his cart in between and basically stopped them. And that is that's super heroic if you think about it, especially compared to Shazam himself or Captain Marvel himself. Captain Marvel has like ultimate powers. He is bulletproof. He is super strong. He has all these powers. It doesn't take much courage to stand up against mafia people or people with guns if you have superpowers. There's no real courage there. You know, if you know you're bulletproof, well, you can jump in front of a gun. But Steamboat, he didn't have those superpowers. He was just a normal guy. But he was exceptional in the respect that you know, he was willing to risk his life for others. And that is truly heroic. He is a hero. He's not a superhero. He doesn't have superpowers, but he is a hero. And I kind of want people to understand that that's a comic from the early 40s. So this is not like a modern comic. This is an older comic. This is how people thought. They didn't think that black people were just like inferior. They actually saw that there was heroism in the black community. And when they created Steamboat, they actually didn't hide the fact that he was black in every way. Like he had black skin. He had he had the very caricature like features of a black person. He had the big lips, very dark skin. He also had the vernacular of black people. And I find that people think, oh, that was so racist. But really, it was not. It was embracing all those elements about him. That's what made him great. That's what made him realistic, because he had all the attributes that actually are of that community. And, nowadays when they put a black character into a comic, in a way, we do it in such a way that's kind of racist, because we don't embrace what black people are. The behavior of black people is different. They have their own culture. There is cultural differences, and we have a tendency of just race swapping, where we take a white character with a white culture with a white whatever, and we just switch them out with a black person, and they don't necessarily have all those character traits. Another story that really bothered me recently was to just kind of illustrate this, and this is a modern story, was What If. Now, they did the race swap there, and it kind of didn't work. And the reason it didn't work was they made T'Challa, who's the Black Panther, into Star-Lord. Now, Star-Lord, when there's a scene in the beginning of Star-Lord where he gets the one of the Infinity Stones, and that stone, he goes into this kind of like ancient city that's completely deserted, and he gets the stone, kind of Indiana Jones style. And then he's met with a group of people who basically are going to steal the stone from him. Similar to Indiana Jones. It was such an Indiana Jones ripoff. But in the case of in that scene, actually, he's like, I'm Star-Lord. And that's the original Guardians of the Galaxy movie. He's like, I'm Star-Lord. And they're like, Star-Lord who? They didn't know who he was. They didn't, and that was kind of funny because, he's like all proud and he looks like he's really cool. He had just done all these kind of Indiana Jones things, and they don't even know who he is. He's nobody. But when Black Panther or T'Challa is the new Star-Lord, he comes in, he does all the same stuff, and when he is confronted by those guys that are going to steal the orb from him, he says, I'm Star-Lord. And they, instead of saying, "Oh, who's Star Lord? We don't know Star Lord," they say, "Oh, Star Lord, you're Star Lord. Oh, you're the most amazingest, greatest, wonderfulest person." Oh, and they start bowing down to him, and they treat him like he's like so special, and that carries throughout the whole story, where the Black Star Lord is all of a sudden so much better than any previous Star Lord. And it just seemed very pandering to me and very over the top. And that's something that happens with this kind of culture that we have now. And uh, I don't want to say woke culture, but it is kind of like this attitude where they try to put in certain attributes into stories nowadays. That white people are bad, that black people are great. There's nothing wrong with black people. They're perfect in every way, and that is lazy story writing. Because what makes a character really interesting is their flaws. Just like Steamboat. Steamboat was flawed. He kind of talked a bit funny. He was a bit goofy, but and he was weak. He had no superpowers. he was weak, but he was heroic. He could stand, despite all that. He could still do things that show that he was a true hero. And to me, that shows a much more positive attitude towards the different races than what we have nowadays, which is kind of virtue signaling and not really progressive in the way that they might think. They think that they're being progressive, but it's very low expectations, and it's in some ways more racist nowadays than what they had back in the 40s. Another thing another golden age story that I really want to tell you is about Weird Fantasy 18. Okay, this is an EC comic. Just before the whole Seduction of the Innocent and Comic Code Authority, they had some really great stories. They were telling really awesome stories. And one of these stories from Weird Fantasy 18 from 1953 is called Judgment Day. And Judgment Day was the story of this guy in a spacesuit. Okay, he comes down to a planet, and he meets with the representative of that planet. And the planet is called Obion, Orbian, Obrian. Okay, I don't know how to pronounce it. But the planet is filled with robots. Okay, and there's two types of robots on the planet. There's these orange ones that are kind of the dominant robot, and there's these blue ones that are kind of like the kind of oppressed oppressed robot group. So those are the two robots. Okay, and they're just blue and orange. Okay, so this person comes down and meets this astronaut comes down and meets this robot leader, and basically he says that I'm a representative of the world of planets, the Galactic Alliance. Okay, and you have been chosen to maybe be part of that alliance. And it's a big deal because we'll give you all our knowledge and blah blah blah, and you can become part of this greater whole, greater society. And so the representative of the robot planet is like, wow, this is a really great opportunity, and he's like, I will show you my world. We're really advanced and we're really great too, and I hope that we can enter into your alliance. So the robot goes and gives him a tour of the planet. They mainly of just one city, but a representative city. And they see that there is this difference between the orange robots and the blue robots. The blue robots are kind of demeaned. They're kind of seen as lesser. So they go to the blue town. There's like this blue town where all the blue robots live, and there's a factory there. And in the factory, they basically make robots, and they either make orange robots or blue robots. And they see the assembly line when they go into this little factory, and the factory is kind of run down because it doesn't get the funds that an orange factory would get, but they still make robots there. And when they make robots, they use the same exact parts. The only thing that's different about the two robots is one robot is blue and one robot is orange, because the outer sheathing is that color, and that's the only difference. And but still, this representative of the robot world, he sees that as totally normal, he sees it as totally fine that they are discriminated based on the color of their sheathing. So at the end of the story, they're denied access to the Galactic Alliance. Now, the representative of the robot world, he's like, I'm just one robot. I can't change this about my culture. This is the way we are. And the astronaut guy says, well, once you make those changes, once you become more inclusive, maybe, then maybe you can join our alliance, because we want, you have to not only become technically advanced, but you also have to, be socially advanced. So the astronaut leaves and just goes away. But the very last panel, the astronaut takes off his helmet, and he's in his rocket ship and he's looking out into the stars. And when you see his face, it's a human, and it's a black man. So this is a story that really shows that struggle between the different races, basically, and how we're very similar in many ways. Just the skin color is different. There's more to it than that, but we'll just assume that is the major difference. And it's a very progressive story. And this is written in the 50s. The 50s, if you remember, that's before the civil rights era. That's during the height of all these kind of craziness that happened in America. And that's what I'm saying, that comics were not the racist things that people think they were. They had real stories with real political insight. And the thing is, what you have, and Jerno, Chris from Jerno, he made the mistake too, that he was complaining about others. He was saying that people are lazy about reading the comics and knowing the stories before they make comments about future stories. And he didn't, when he made his comment about how racist people were in the past, he never read the stories from the past. He didn't know that back then they were actually pretty progressive. They actually didn't think in such racist ways. Now, there was racism. I admit that there was racism. There was sexism, whatever. There was that. But doesn't mean that everyone was like that. It doesn't mean the stories were like that. It didn't mean the comics were like that. So I think this desire to quickly jump to conclusions about other people and about other times in history is a real big mistake. And I think we should all be less lazy about reading comics and really read them first before making that jump to whatever conclusion we come to. Read them and then make a judgment. Just like Chris said, Chris was right on that. And be fair about people in the past, because people in the past were not necessarily racist the way that we think. And I don't really want this channel to be a political channel and all this kind of stuff. I really want people to appreciate comics. And I really want people to understand that comics are a great medium to tell interesting stories. And what we have nowadays is less focus on the story and more focus on a political agenda. And that is a mistake, because you can achieve that political agenda through a great story. just like I was telling you some great stories that happened in the Golden Age. And often nowadays, there is a bit of laziness in the writing where they do force the, that either gender swap or race swap or like sexual orientation swap. And it is in many ways very lazy. And it is degrading to the very people that they're trying to help. And maybe that's why a lot of people feel something wrong with this writing, that it's not about storytelling anymore. It's about pushing a political agenda. And that always comes across as wrong. It comes across as pandering. It comes across as demeaning to the very people that it's supposed to be lifting up. And people don't like that. It's just like, what movie? There's so many movies that nowadays that you can complain about. But it's sort of like, if you look at the difference between Rey and Luke Skywalker, Rey just magically was able to do everything. And Luke, who is as talented and has all the abilities that Rey should, he was talented at the Force, but he still had to go through the learning process. He was still, clumsy with it. He didn't, you have to go through that learning process. He never had the training, so he had to learn to be a Jedi. Whereas Rey, she just was awesome. She could instantly fly the Millennium Falcon. She could instantly fight a trained Jedi with the lightsaber that she had just learned, just picked up for the first time. So these things come across as heavy-handed and lazy in terms of the writing, and that's what people have issues with. So that's, as I said, that's what we see nowadays a lot of. And that's what there's so much backlash against. And I really wanted to speak to that backlash because I think a lot of these people that there's, backlash where they have this backlash where they really upset that some character is now black or gay or whatever. They're misunderstood too. They, people think, oh, they're just against they're just against gay people or whatever. Or they're against black people. But maybe, don't jump to that conclusion. Maybe these people that have these feelings of, that they're upset about these race swaps and gender swaps and whatever swaps, they are doing so because of the fact that they just don't like the storytelling. The way it's done is heavy-handed and not right. So that has been my response to Chris's video. I hope you check out Chris's channel, and he is a great YouTuber. But I will link his video that I'm commenting on in the channel description. I recommend you check it out. And please, if you enjoyed this content, it's not my typical unboxing video that I do so many of. Please comment below and leave me a like and a share, and also subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye for now.